Where the Stars Do Not Take Sides by Witch of Endor. Chapter 3. Don't let me break this. And Lord, don't let me break this. Let me hold it lightly. Give me arms to pray with instead of ones that hold too tightly. Azula never flees. She doesn't stop running until she's back at the ship. Azula tactically retreats because she sees several steps ahead and she knows when a small loss will equal a large gain, but she never flees. She orders the crew to move, chooses any direction that is away, and locks herself in a room. Azula has a job to do. Her job is to capture the Avatar alive and return him to Father. She is the crown princess and she will go down in history for this. She sits at her desk and stares at the remains of her plans, and her mind is utterly blank. Azula rifles through her maps, forming the basis of a plan. Her brother is alive. Her brother is alive. How was that possible? What happened to him and Mother? How did he get that scar? Why is he with the Avatar? Azula should have captured the Avatar by now. This is her third run-in with the Avatar and his little team of peasant children. They barely seem to have a plan, but they keep slipping out of her hands. And now they have a firebender, making them a perfect little matched sit, an annoyingly apt metaphor for the Avatar himself. What happens if she captures Zuko too? What if she brings him home? Azula isn't naive enough to think that Father will welcome him home with open arms. Whatever happened to Zuko has clearly tainted him, turned him into the enemy. But could Azula keep him alive somehow? Can she craft a plan that would allow Zuko to come home? Azula sits back, eyes going unfocused as she stares at the flame banner on the wall. The Avatar has a team. Maybe it's time that Azula has a team too. Why do you think she ran? The Avatar asks. They've chosen a new hideout and made camp, and Zuko is helping Aang and Sokka to erect the tents while Katara cooks. Toph has begged off due to blindness, but judging by the expression on Katara's face, there's more to her excuse than that. Momo is also helping, which is to say that he's perching on top of whatever Zuko is handling and staring at him with wide, wide eyes. Momo likes you, Sokka points out, smiling. Momo is a nuisance, Zuko responds, but he doesn't really mind. Now that he's worked past the panic and spent hours watching the world from above, he's feeling a lot more at peace with this situation. There isn't any going back for Zuko, so the only way is forward. I think she's scared of Sparky, Toph replies to Aang, kicking her feet into the air as she lies on her back by the fire. Did you see how she looked at him? Why would she be scared of Lee? Aang asks. Toph hums. I guess because we're complete now? We have all the elements covered. Maybe that's making our second guest fighting us 4-on-1. Zuko frowns, glancing around the group. 5-on-1. He corrects. There are 5 of us. Zuko assumes that Toph had just miscounted because she's used to them being a group of 4, but then Sokka beams up at Zuko. Yes, thank you, Lee. There are 5 of us, aren't there? I guess I didn't count Sokka because he's not a bender, Toph explains. Zuko frowns. But he's still the fighter. He has the boomerang, he points out. And I mostly fight with swords, so if I count... Sokka shoots a desperate look at his sister and gestures to Zuko. Can we keep him forever? He pleads, and Katara rolls her eyes. Zuko suppresses a smile. Later that night, around the campfire, Zuko thinks about how to tell them who he is. There's no need for them to call him Lee anymore, after all, if the Fire Nation knows that he's here. He's close to doing it, finding the right wording, thinking about how to explain how he got to the Earth Kingdom with as few details as possible, when the conversation turns back to Azula. The problem is that if we take out the Fire Lord, Princess Azula is the next in line, Katara says, shuddering. I'm not sure that's any better. She's insane, Sokka nods in agreement. And Zuko sees what's going to happen with alarming clarity. If he tells them who he is, then they're going to try to put him on the dragon throne. It's almost too perfect. They have an ally who could make a play for the throne. As long as they do this correctly, the Fire Nation will have to accept Zuko's claim. The edges of Zuko's vision gray out slightly again, and he makes himself take deep, measured breaths. He can't Panic now. He needs to think. He needs to think. Zuko doesn't find a solution that night, but he does come to one conclusion. He is never ascending that throne. He would rather die in this war. In some ways, the following days find Zuko falling into rhythm with the team. In other ways, he doesn't at all. For a start, he doesn't understand their relationships. It seems like every other sentence Toph says is aimed to get a rise out of someone. The siblings bicker incessantly. Aang is flighty as a bird, sometimes less metaphorically than one would expect, and it takes a lot of patience to teach him anything, which Toph decidedly does not possess. But despite all of that, they make it clear that they would die for one another. Zuko is also always just a little bit convinced that he's made a mistake. He shouldn't be here. If they lose this war, he dies. If they win, they might force him onto the throne. During their second fight together, Zuko sees how they fit together like puzzle pieces. For all Toph mocks Sokka's fighting style, she also seems to know how and when to depend on him for a long-range attack or distraction. Aang is suddenly focused and determined. Katara listens to Sokka's plan and carries it out effectively instead of questioning him the way she does with his navigation. Zuko doesn't know where he fits in yet, but he supposes there's probably time to figure that out. They're fighting against a group of Fire Nation soldiers who are terrorizing a group of Earth Kingdom refugees. It's a brutal clash, but it's also over quickly. The soldiers flee, and the team turns to take stock of the refugees. There are some minor injuries, but they mostly seem okay. And then, while Aang is answering questions about being the Avatar, Zuko hears something strange. Zuko's hearing has always been excellent. It's not as good as it was prior to the burning, but it's still above average, and so he seems to be the only one who responds to the sound. It's coming from around a corner, and Zuko follows it until he finds her. She's a small girl, 2 years old at most, and she's cowering. Zuko kneels so that he's close to her height.
"Hi there,"
he says.
"I'm Lee. What's your name?"
The girl peeks up from behind her knees, and Zuko smiles at her. Minutes later, he rejoins the group, this time with a new addition. "I found another sword. Do we need another sword?" Aang is asking, holding up a weapon that the soldiers had dropped.
Zuko clears his throat. "Well, I found a baby. Do we need a baby?"
He's aiming for a joke, because this group seems to thrive on finding reasons to laugh. But it falls flat. They turn to look at him, confusion morphing into surprise, and Katara actually squeaks. "Oh, Tui Allah, she's so cute!" Katara says. "What's your name?" Zuko shifts her on his hip and leans away so that he can look at her properly.
"We've been over this, but she's not saying,"
he explains, and the girl giggles and hides behind her aunts. "Oh, that's funny," Zuko asks.
"I'm going to have to give you a name, and it's going to be terrible and old-fashioned. Do you really want a terrible old lady name?"
The girl giggles again. Where are her parents?" Aang asks, worry lacing his tone. Zuko hushes him, and then throws him a quick frown that he hopes conveys, "Shut up! I just got this kid to stop crying!"
"They'll find us soon,"
he says to the girl.
"Of course, it would help to know your name."
She hides behind her hands and shakes her head.
No name? Are you the girl with no name?" "Mysterious,"
he says, dropping his voice low.
"Intriguing."
The child is giggling again now. Zuko smiles and then looks back to the group. Katara is still cooing at the girl, and Sokka is wearing a very confusing, wide-eyed expression as he stares at Zuko, so Zuko gives up on them both. He turns to Toph and Aang.
"Can you go ask around while I keep the Enigma amused?"
It turns out that it isn't necessary. "Aura!" a voice calls out, and the girl jumps in Zuko's arms and twists to look around. "Aura, there you are!" Zuko lets out a relieved breath. Aura holds out her arms toward the woman, and Zuko shifts her weight to pass the toddler over.
"She was hiding,"
Zuko says as Aura clings to her mother.
"She's a smart kid getting herself out of the way like that."
Aura has started crying again now that her mother is here. The relief is probably overwhelming. The woman kisses her on the top of her head and then looks at Zuko. "Thank you for taking care of her," she says. "Aura, what do we say to the nice young man?" Aura lifts her head and looks at Zuko, and then giggles again. There are still tears on her face. She's probably overtired.
"Yeah, that's about right,"
Zuko agrees. He bows.
"It was nice to meet you, Aura of no name." Aura's mother looks confused, but Aura keeps giggling as they leave, so Zuko counts it as a win.
Well, if we ever decide to steal a baby, we know who our guy is, Toph states.
If we ever decide to steal a baby again, Aang corrects. I'm sorry, Zuko says. What? When May and Ty Lee are on board, Azula locks them in a private room and glares them both into submission.
I need to disclose something to you, she says, pitching her voice into a dangerous tone. And it never leaves this room. You don't even talk about it with one another unless I'm here and I allow it.
Ty Lee looks wide-eyed and trusting. May looks bored, but it's a cover Azula sees right through her. Ugh, what is it? May asks. Azula feels her eyebrows drawing in without her permission, and she forces them back. Zuko is alive. As they continue to travel, Zuko realizes something fundamentally strange about their relationships. Nobody seems to owe anyone anything. They just work together. Katara does most of the cooking, but that doesn't mean that everyone is indebted to her. When Zuko starts helping, Katara seems mostly happy for the company and not upset that it means that Zuko will owe her less. It kind of reminds Zuko of some of the families he's seen. The better ones, better than his family by far, just seem to work together as if there is one common goal and it doesn't matter over much who owes what to whom. These kids are like that, weaving in and out of each other's space, asking for help and receiving it, volunteering for jobs, keeping each other company. When he notices this, something relaxes in Zuko that he didn't even realize was tense. And they seem to like him? Toph has taken to mocking him for never talking about himself, but she seems to lightly insult everyone on the team. Aang is always thanking him for his fire-bending pointers and seems to think that it's appropriate to outright say, "We really like you, Lee," and "I'm glad you joined us, Lee." Like it's normal to just tell people things like that. Katara is already kind-natured, but she also seeks out his company, specifically, and Sokka is... Well, Zuko doesn't understand Sokka at all, but Sokka smiles at him a lot, often for no apparent reason. Even Momo seems comfortable with him, and Appa lets him steer without complaint. So Zuko starts to think that maybe he should disclose his story to them. Maybe they wouldn't make him ascend the throne if he said he didn't want to. But it would mean choosing Zuko's comfort over choosing what they think is best for the world, Zuko reminds himself. That's not likely to happen, is it? And then they gain a plan, and Zuko thinks, this is it. If they want to attack the Fire Nation, they obviously need to know their options now. And then they lose Appa, and it all falls apart. Zuko seats himself across from Aang, who looks like he needs to sleep for a week. It isn't clear whether it's the Avatar state that sapped his energy, or losing Appa, or some combination of the two. He's been flinging himself between anger and despair since Appa's disappearance, and they've all been dehydrated and scorched, and if Aang doesn't sleep soon, he's going to collapse. Okay, Zuko says, drawing Aang's attention. You need to cry. What? Aang asks. Zuko hands over a pouch of water. Aang takes it and drinks, which is good, because he's going to need the rehydration for the tears that are inevitably coming. You need to cry, Zuko repeats. Aang scowls at him. I know you don't want to, but if we're going to figure out a plan and find Appa, then you need to work through this place you're in, which means that you need to cry. What do you know? Aang asks, turning his body so that he's not facing Zuko anymore. There's a lot that Zuko could say to that. I know because I've lost everything before too. I know because I've cared for grieving children. I just know, trust me. But this isn't about Zuko, so he doesn't. He lets the silence fester, waiting for Aang to tire of it. He might have only spent days by Aang's side, but he knows as well as anyone that he can't let a silence sit. Aang sighs. Appa is the last one who knows me from home. Zuko nods. I have to find him, Lee. I have to. We will, Zuko says, even though it's a dangerous promise. But he thinks that Aang needs to hear it and needs to hear that it's we and not I. Aang looks up at him and his eyes well up with tears. That's good. The king flings himself at Zuko to cry, which is less good because Zuko doesn't like being touched, but this isn't about Zuko and his preferences.
The Avatar cries, and eventually cries himself to sleep.
They travel to Ba Sing Se to warn the Earth King. And without Appa, it takes a while. Zuko is going to tell them about who he is because it's the right thing to do, even if it all goes wrong for Zuko. When the panic clamps down and he finds himself thinking, but I don't want to, Zuko reminds himself that not everything is about what he wants. If they force him onto the throne, then that happens. Zuko might not even survive the war for it to be a problem. But he can't ascend the dragon throne. He can't. Zuko decides that he'll tell Sokka first, because Sokka is their strategist. Aang might be the Avatar and the one who likes Zuko best, but he's still not in a good place. Aang might be able to focus his energy on moving forward now, but he's still in a vulnerable place. Zuko might be able to press an advantage with Aang. Aang likes him, and Aang is having a hard time. He could probably find a way to verbally corner him into a promise not to force Zuko onto the throne. But he won't do that. They're in the midst of their travels, having run into an old friend of the team, when Zuko pulls Sokka aside. I need to tell you something, Zuko says, and Sokka stands up straighter. I need to tell you something too, Sokka says, and then takes a deep breath and says very quickly, the thing that Suki said about us kissing was it was just a kiss on the cheek, we're not a thing. I was sort of seeing someone at the North Pole, but we told you about Yue, right? She became the moon? Zuko blinks, and then blinks again. He starts, and then Sokka looks at him imploringly. Okay, Sokka replies, and then smiles a bit shakily. I just wanted you to know that. Zuko is so confused, and suddenly feels very awkward because he doesn't know what's happening, and maybe Sokka isn't the person he should tell. Maybe he should talk to Katara. Toph is obviously the bottom of the list. Toph isn't even on the list. Katara will be kind about the fact that Zuko didn't tell them right away, and also Katara mostly makes sense. Okay, Sokka says again when Zuko fails to respond. What did you want to tell me? That's nothing, Zuko replies, pulling away to return to the others. Don't worry about it. Zuko's friends don't know who he is. It doesn't take Azula long to realize this. This means that Zuko's friends don't know that they're holding a secret weapon, a road to power, a method to end the war. Which means that Zuko is either smarter or stupider than Azula had expected. Safely hidden in the folds of Ba Sing Se, Azula watches her brother from a distance. He and his friends are still searching for the sky bison. They go out every day and ask after it, and one of them usually spends a few hours wandering around while blowing into an apparently silent whistle.
We separate them, she says to May and Ty Lee. It shouldn't be too hard. Zuko and the Avatar have to live. I don't care about the others. Azula thinks about how they're Zuko's friends, even if he doesn't trust them enough to tell them his own name. She sighs. But don't kill them unless you have to.
Ba Sing Se is the weirdest place Zuko has ever been. It's huge and bustling, nothing like the Earth Kingdom towns and cities he has traveled through. It's also frustratingly difficult to get the Avatar a meeting with the Earth King, and they still can't find Appa. They end up drawing posters, which then get taken down, and they rinse and repeat. They take turns with the bison whistle. They talk to everyone they can, just in case anyone has seen him. Zuko is not filled with hope, but they don't have a better plan. While Aang and Katara continue to work their way toward meeting the Earth King, and Toph takes a turn with the bison whistle, Zuko helps Sokka to make more posters. Sokka's drawing is getting a little more accurate, but only because he's copying a picture that Katara drew. Now that the younger kids are out, Zuko finds himself asking, do you think we'll find him? Sokka hesitates, and ink drips until he puts everything to one side. He looks up at Zuko, serious in a way that he usually isn't. We have to believe that we will, he says eventually, and Zuko nods. I know, he replies. I know Aang needs us to believe it, and Appa's worth more alive than dead, so that means he's probably okay. He nods and then looks to Sokka again. Sokka smiles at him with half of his mouth. It's oddly charming. That's the spirit, I guess, he says, and something about the odd atmosphere makes it seem a little funny, and then Zuko's eyes land on Sokka's most recent picture. What Sokka, I can't even tell which end of Appa you're drawing, he says, and the laugh bubbles up from somewhere deep in Zuko. He holds up a hand to cover his mouth like he can force the sound back in, but then Sokka snatches at his hand. No! Sokka laughs. Don't you dare! That's the first time I've heard you properly laugh, even if it was at me! He forces Zuko's hand down, and Zuko semi-wrestles against it, and the laughter keeps coming. It's not really that funny, but some kind of tension has broken because they're both near hysterical with it. And then Zuko's eyes catch on Sokka's, and he realizes that he's being watched. The laughter slows to a stop, and Zuko is suddenly very aware of how close they're sitting and how Sokka's hand is still on Zuko's. Sokka swallows, and Zuko looks down at his throat, and then Sokka is leaning forward. When Sokka kisses him, it feels like having a head rush, but somehow in a good way. Zuko finds himself leaning forward automatically, his mind shutting off and his body taking over as he adds pressure to the kiss. Sokka makes a soft noise. It causes Zuko to draw a sharp breath, which breaks the kiss for just a moment before Sokka presses in again. Sokka's other hand lands on Zuko's knee, just the tiniest bit of pressure for leverage, and a zing of heat rushes through Zuko. And then Zuko's brain catches up with his body. Zuko pulls back abruptly, scrambling away from Sokka, and it feels like the floor has been pulled out from under him. He just found his footing, just decided that he maybe trusts these people, and he's been wrong this whole time. Zuko is such an idiot! I don't owe you that, Zuko says, as firm as he can make his voice. Sokka blinks, cheeks warm and eyes looking a little dazed. What? I don't owe you that. You can't just... Zuko climbs to his feet, his knees feeling a little watery. What does he do now? It's only been weeks, but his life feels so ensnared with this team's lives now. Does he just leave? Will they even let him? Lee, are you... okay? Sokka asks, and it's a testament to how little Zuko's brain is functioning that he hadn't even noticed Sokka standing. Sokka takes a step forward, looking confused, and Zuko takes 3 steps back. Well, okay, I'm sorry. Zuko stares. Is that it? Does Sokka just say sorry and this is over? How much debt does Zuko have and how does it get repaid? Zuko takes a deep, calming breath. I don't owe you that, he says again, and Sokka nods. Okay, he agrees. Yeah, you don't owe me anything. I'm not... You know that's not how that works, right? I didn't kiss you because I think you owe me anything. Zuko goes very still. The equation shifts. He looks over to the floor where they had been sitting and frowns. He doesn't ask why, but Sokka must hear it anyway because he explains. I kissed you because I like you. That's all. It's okay if you don't like me back. I'm sorry, I should have asked first or something. Zuko looks over to Sokka again, who's now rubbing at the back of his neck, his cheeks stained red with embarrassment. Oh, Zuko replies. Sokka meets Zuko's eyes again. It looks like it's difficult for Sokka to do. He shrugs. Yeah, Sokka agrees and then coughs. Maybe we can just pretend this didn't happen? Zuko's mind has come back to life, and now it's racing. Nobody has ever kissed Zuko just because they liked him before, but he supposes that's how it's meant to go, right? Just because Zuko's experiences with this have been messed up doesn't mean that Sokka is messed up. He's Sokka. He's kind and funny and sarcastic and somehow always hungry no matter how much they eat, and he's smarter than anyone gives him credit for. And that kiss felt really, really good. Dread settles in Zuko's stomach. He likes Sokka. Somehow, without realizing it at all, he's put himself in this awful position. He's backed himself into this corner because Sokka doesn't know who he is. Zuko realizes that his hands are trembling and, of course, because Toph's timing is impeccable, that's when she slams the door open. Alright, I am off duty. Someone take the whistle, she insists, and then pauses. Whoa, what happened? Zuko assumes that his heart is doing something ridiculous. He draws a deep breath. I'll take it. he suggests and walks past Sokka to the door. He needs to clear his head and figure out what he's going to do.
Zuko goes out alone. Azula follows. The Avatar is with a waterbender, but they're perfectly positioned. The waterbending peasant won't get in the way too much. Azula sends the signal to May and Ty Lee and then follows her brother on his bison searching duty. Zuko looks distressed. Azula watches him for long minutes. He's walking in fits and bursts, almost running and then stopping entirely and running his hands through his hair. And Azula's traitorous heart wants to know what's wrong, even as her mind formulates a plan. She doesn't even need a plan in the end. Zuko is so troubled that he's paying no attention to his surroundings, and he ends up walking himself into a quiet dead end. Azula smiles from behind him and calls blue fire to her palms. "Hello, Zuzu." Zuko spins and then stares at her for a long moment. He doesn't say a word. Azula frowns. "Not going to say hello to your dear sister?" Zuko breathes deeply and trembles on the inhale.
"What are you doing here?"
he asks. Azula smiles, sharp and steady. "Taking you home, of course," she answers. It's all very fast after that. Zuko is without his swords, which is hopelessly stupid since he's apparently very rusty at firebending without them. Azula takes him down methodically, pressing her advantage of space and of training and of emotional stability. Eventually, Zuko stops even fighting back. Zuko's posture falters. He looks resigned. "You're taking me to father," he says. "He'll kill me." As if Azula hasn't thought this through. Zuko must hardly remember her. Azula isn't going to let him die. He has information on the enemies of the Fire Nation, which means that he's worth keeping alive, and all Azula needs is a few days to convince father to let her keep him that way. They'll write him out of the line of succession easily, and he'll have to remain under serious supervision until the war is won, but there is a method to get him out of this alive. Azula has been painstakingly meticulous about this. "You and the Avatar," Azula replies, letting herself smile. "My team is picking him up right now." Zuko has gone very tense. "You won't catch him," he insists. They're both standing in fighting positions, but there is no fire anymore. Azula tilts her head. She isn't sure why she isn't attacking or why Zuko isn't defending. And then the hawk lands by Azula's feet, and she smiles. "I think you'll find that my people already have him and the waterbender cornered." Zuko's stance drops. "Take me to them." Azula should say no. She should knock him out. She should at least tie him up. But she does none of those things, simply nodding her hand into his hair and marching him along. By the time they arrive outside the throne room, there is clear commotion inside. Azula turns to Zuko. She's been holding back on questioning him until they're in a more stable position, but she's overwhelmed with the need to know. "Where is Mother?" she asks, fire in her palms in case her brother tries to run. Zuko looks back at her. His eyes are oddly empty in this moment. "She's dead," Zuko replies, and Azula nods. She opens the door and pushes her brother through it. In the throne room, the Avatar is moments from succumbing. The waterbender isn't doing any better. They didn't stand a chance, trapped and alone against her fake Yoshi warriors and her Dai Li. Azula's smile feels like it starts in her soul. Azula looks to Zuko. His eyes have hardened, but he doesn't look like he's about to throw himself into the fight. "This is a mistake," he tells her. He doesn't even look at her as he says it. "If you upset Aang enough, he'll go into the Avatar state and everyone in this room is going to end up dead." Azula rolls her eyes. "Of course you'd say that. What, do you want me to let him go?" "Yes," Zuko agrees and then turns to face her. "If you keep fighting him like this, he's going to end up hurting everyone. We'll all get away. But..." He swallows, clearly finding this next part difficult. Azula is intrigued. But if you let him go, you can take me. I won't fight you. I'll come." Azula watches her brother for a long moment. He's offering her a success without a gamble. If she keeps pushing at the Avatar, she might get everything, or she might get nothing. And here's the flaw in Azula's plan, the one she's barely managed to cover over with excuses. If she brings Zuko home without the Avatar, he's more likely to survive because his information will be more useful. The longer Zuko needs to be kept alive for information, the more time Azula has to convince Father to let her keep him alive in general. Lee! The Avatar calls, clearly having spotted them in the doorway. Zuko doesn't look over. He keeps staring at Azula, somewhere between blank and imploring, and Azula keeps staring back. She should take the gamble. The Avatar is more important. Azula has never been an only child. Azula has always had a brother. All these years. All these years. She should take the gamble. Azula raises a hand and touches the edges of Zuko's scar. He flinches away automatically and then clearly calms himself. Azula traces the rough edge of the scar. After a moment, she lets her hand drop. This isn't a good decision. Azula makes it anyway. On your knees, she says, and Zuko drops immediately. Azula hums and then turns to her small army. Withdraw, she insists, and they start to pull back. The Avatar and the Waterbender continue to defend themselves, and then the Waterbender spots Zuko on the ground. Horror sweeps across her features. Zuko turns his head away from her and stares at the floor. Cuff him, Azula says to her nearest soldier. I'm sorry, Zuko says, but it isn't loud enough for his friends to hear. Lee! The Waterbender calls again, and Azula's guards pull Zuko to his feet and drag him away. Azula follows. She hopes this isn't a mistake.